I want to pass along three stories here. And the thing that they have in common deals with the rule of law and the respect for it, because again, it's a cornerstone of democracy in America or any place that people serve because they won in free and fair elections. They promise to abide by the Constitution. They pass laws. People abide by the laws. If they don't, there are penalties. And so here are three examples of where you thought we could take that for granted in this country, in this state, but you can't. First one, it deals with our friend, former Supreme Court Justice Michael Gableman. You recall, I felt like Greg was getting the laugh track ready, or just his own one-man laugh track, just at the mention of Inspector Clouseau over here. Yeah, there we go. He was given the job of, quote unquote, investigating the presidential election in 2020, which, again, there's a way to do it. There were recounts, there were audits, there were court challenges, no problems were found. And yet Robin Vos announced the hiring of former Justice Gableman at the Republican State Convention in 2021. So how much on the up and up did you think this investigation was going to be in the first place? Well, since that time, it has cost taxpayers something like $2.5 million and multiple court cases, not of any irregularities in the election, but in Gableman's conduct. The times where he threatened to jail local officials like local mayors if they didn't come in and testify in secret before him, and his conduct in court when he was accused of, not adhering to state rules and laws on things like public records and things like that. Well, it led to the Office of Lawyer Regulation deciding to hold a hearing as to whether he should face discipline. And Gableman would not even come in for a deposition for that at one point. Well, it appears in this story in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel by Molly Beck that Gableman has reached some kind of a deal. And in it, as part of this deal, he could lose his license to practice law for 3 years. The deal heads to a court-appointed referee who must approve it before it is reviewed by the Wisconsin Supreme Court. As part of the agreement, Molly writes, Gableman acknowledged he could not successfully defend himself against the allegations against him. Gableman served one 10-year term in the Supreme Court, and for all intents and purposes, I don't want to go back too far, but when you say, why are Supreme Court races in Wisconsin, why are they so negative, so dirty, so expensive? It actually starts with Michael Gableman and his run for a state Supreme Court seat several years back in unseating Justice Louis Butler. It was a campaign with clearly race-baiting ads where he could have and should have faced discipline from the rest of the state Supreme Court, but the conservatives on the court didn't want to take that step. And so Gableman, again, when there's no consequences, you're just going to keep doing the same thing over and over again. And that's what Gableman did again and again with this investigation of his that did not abide by the rules. He believed the rules didn't apply to him until they did. And now, after so many negative headlines, he and Robin Vos are on the outs. Gableman has supported people who challenged Robin Vos in the primaries. And for all of Gableman's antics, it looks like it has finally caught up with him to the point where he is probably going to have his law license taken away for at least a 3-year period. So there's one case where the rule of law, it gets treated casually, shall we say, but in the end, justice prevails. Then there's the whole rule of law part about, rounding up people on the streets. Let's say it again for the kids in the back here who are waving their red MAGA hats right now. You and so many other people supported Donald Trump doing whatever it took to round up people who were in this country, who were undocumented and were committing crimes and causing other trouble. And few people would disagree with that. But that does not mean that you suspend due process. It does not mean that you do not, respect the rule of law. And you certainly don't just, round up people on the streets and disappear them. And next thing you know, they're in another country even if they don't have a criminal record or they're in a detention center in another state, even without a criminal record. And spare me well, they're here illegally, so they're committing a crime. That is at best a civil offense. At best, it is a misdemeanor. And yet you have no problem with all the expense it takes for law enforcement to round up people who were here on visas. Maybe they overstayed because of COVID, but still followed the process as anybody can do, COVID or no COVID, to say, yep, I'm still here and I would like to apply. You don't have to approve it, but I'm going to go through the steps to apply to become a citizen. And yet we had the case of a Wisconsin woman, Camila Munoz, who had been here as an exchange student, a college student, I should say, from Peru. She was working in Wisconsin Dells. She was newly married. She and her husband came back from their honeymoon. She was detained by ICE, and she was just released from detention after 7 weeks, 6 weeks of that without any court hearing whatsoever. When she finally got that hearing, it was quite clear that she had no business being in detention. She's not a criminal. She was doing the right things to stay here. But again, because this new administration is just has no respect for the rule of law, it just goes to tell you that, again, yeah, you might think something like that isn't going to happen to you, but if they'll invent things like this to take care of people who don't look like you, how long will it be before they take steps to try to either detain or at least try to, shall we say, influence people who disagree with them? And now the last one is the one that really takes the cake, and that's what is happening in North Carolina. The North Carolina Supreme Court is made up of 5 Republicans and 2 Democrats. One of the Democrats, Allison Riggs, was running for re-election in November, and she won very narrowly. She won by just 734 votes, but there were recounts and challenges, and she won by a narrow margin. The Republican who lost, however, did not concede. Appeals Court Judge Jefferson Griffin did not accept the will of the voters. He's been fighting in court ever since. And he knew that there were enough Republican judges on courts that he could get it to the point where it is right now, where last week, in a thunderbolt decision by the North Carolina Court of Appeals, the 2 far-right judges overruled the 1 Democratic judge and said it is possible, it is okay to possibly throw out 65,000 votes, despite no demonstrable fraud on the part of those voters, and then setting up an arbitrary deadline for those voters to come in and prove who they say they were. And that's because in North Carolina, it says that you have to show an ID when you register to vote. Either show a driver's license or give the last 4 digits of your social security number. But it had already been shown in court that it's likely that a lot of these 65,000 voters did give proper ID, but there were data entry mistakes, or get this, women's names changed after getting married. And the court said all those voters who did nothing wrong are suddenly not voters, and that some 65,000 votes shouldn't be counted. It is stunning. And again, it goes against anything in terms of the rule of law when you go out of your way to find a technicality to invalidate an election. Now, for the moment, and only for the moment, those 65,000 voters don't have to do anything. The full North Carolina State Supreme Court on Monday put a temporary stay on this while the case is still working its way through the courts. But it is not out of the question that this Supreme Court, with its 5 Republican justices, will restart the 15-day clock for tens of thousands of voters to have to jump through an extra hoop for their votes to count. Now, that might not be what you and I call a poll tax, but it's in the vein of making voters do more than simply exercise their right to vote, just because someone in power doesn't want their votes to count. That, boys and girls, is an activist court. That's what activist judges really do. It's not the lawfare that conservatives love to use when they lose in court. Because again, for them, every assertion is actually a confession. This is an attempted heist of voting rights that must not be allowed to stand. We will keep you updated on any other stories like these that deal with the disregard for the rule of law in this country.